Greetings fellow YouTuber, my name is Tim. It took 5 months to record on just a 4-track machine, using so many overdubs and so many techniques that it required a mathematical equation by the producer in order to get the sound right. It's the album that sparked a revolution and changed the industry as we know it, in terms of record covers, sound, everything. Of course, I'm talking about Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. 50 years later, the reissue, it's here! We're gonna unbox it, we're going to critique it. Stick around. Now before I begin, I'd like to show you something. This is an original copy of Sgt. Pepper vinyl that my parents got me for my 11th birthday. As you can see, it's still got the original Capitol logo on it, the original rainbow swirl on it that was so prevalent with these albums in '67. I've had this album for the last 50 years, and it's still as vital to me as the first time I ever heard it in my parents' basement. By the time I was done listening to that album for the first time, I was on the floor crying. Never before in my life had I heard anything so vital, so fresh, so new. It has been a huge influence on me in terms of music, production, the Beatles, life in general. It truly was a game changer for me. So when the 50th anniversary reissue came out, obviously I was a little skeptical. But the big question here was, could Giles Martin and Sam O'Kell, in my eyes, retain the original integrity of such a pivotal album? Well, here it is, a true unboxing. Now to show you that my aim is true on this one, I just picked this up from my post office maybe about 10-15 minutes ago. Totally sealed, as you can see, came from the good folks at Amazon. Let's open this baby up, you and I together. Let's figure out exactly what is in this thing. Notice I'm using a knife. Kids, ask your parents' permission, as always. Let's open this bad boy up. You can tell this is filled with all kinds of goodies. Let's see what we've got here. Oh, look at this. Look at this. Bubble wrap! Something to do later. Okay, oh man, it's heavy. It's actually quite heavy. Let's see here. Let's see what we got. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Beautiful packaging. Look at this, will you? That's beautiful. That is very, very well played. Obviously they're going to use the original artwork. They had to use the original Peter Blake artwork, obviously. But on the back, it's not exactly the same. Here, let me get this in a little bit better light for you. They said it's the extensive collector's edition. It gives an unprecedented insight into how the Beatles made their groundbreaking album. So this is a complete box set. There's audio CDs in here. There's Blu-rays. There's DVDs. Let's check this baby out. As you can see, it's beautiful 3D. Very nicely packaged. Let's open this bad boy up and see what we can do. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, look at this. It is a replica of the EMI tape box. Obviously EMI Studios, they used a replica of one of the boxes that the tapes came in, which I think is very cool. Okay, open it up. Very well done, very well done. Look at this. All right, let's see exactly what we've got here. Looky here. I need to open this up before we go any further. Let's see, what do we have here? We have the CDs. Okay, I'll accept that. I'll accept that. Let's see, let's get a shot of that, shall we? These are the 6 CDs that come with the set. The CDs contain the album, obviously, along with various outtakes, and also a very special DVD, which I'm very happy about. This is a DVD of a special that was done that ITV shot in 1993 for the 25th anniversary. It's called The Making of Sgt. Pepper, and it's quite a show. What have we here? Oh, they gave us a poster. Look at this now. This is the original poster, or a copy of the original poster when it was released in '67. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Beatles' new LP, here now. That's very cool. Thank you, EMI. Thank you, Apple. Thank you, Beatles. That's very cool. Of course, you have the cutouts. For those of you who don't know, this is part of the revolutionary way that this album was released, because it was the first time actually anybody gave anything away on an album. These are cutouts. These are cutouts. You can have a toy mustache if you want. There's a stand-up of Sgt. Pepper's Band, Sgt. Stripes. Very cool stuff. These, of course, when I was a kid, of course I cut all this up and destroyed the value of my original album. But be that as it may, people who have the original copy and have these original cutouts have got something. Make no mistake about that. The book. This is a comprehensive book on everything you need to know about the making of Sgt. Pepper. Very nice indeed. All kinds of pictures and descriptions in there, I'm sure. We'll get to that in a minute. And along with this, of course, to give you an idea of just how original the lyricism was, and just what a great lyricist John Lennon was. This is a copy of the poster that hung in his house. And if you take a really good look at it, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but if you take a really good look at it, it talks about everything you hear in the lyrics for being for the benefit of Mr. Kite. Very cool. Now, we've got all of these great little giveaways. We've got all these little trinkets that Apple Records was so nice to give to us. Now, the question becomes, what about the mix? I remember getting the 2009 remaster that Giles Martin's father, the late George Martin, had remastered for the Beatles. And as always, after so many years, there's going to be a couple of little mistakes, but that's to be forgiven. But the big question here was, could Giles Martin and Sam O'Kell, in my eyes, retain the original integrity of such a pivotal album? The quick answer is, yeah, kind of. First, I'd like to address the Beatle purist, if you will. People like me who have followed the band their entire lives. If you're going to listen to this new stereo remaster of the album, the first thing you're going to have to do is put the effect of Beatles stereo out of your mind. Now, for the newbie, I know you're asking me, hey Gainer, what is Beatles stereo? There's one important thing that you have to remember, and that's this. The Beatles, until Abbey Road, always remixed their albums for mono. They really never caught the whole stereo concept. So what happened was Capitol, and subsequently Apple Records, came up with a way to remix the mono mixes for stereo. And what they did was they take all the lows and put them on one channel, and all the highs and put them on another channel. Thus, Beatles stereo. And in many cases, like Sgt. Pepper, that was the case. But this is the 21st century, and these are new producers, and this is a new sound. The first thing you need to do is forget about the fact that it's Beatles stereo. And the one thing you do have to understand is that these mono mixes 50 years ago don't really translate all that well to new stereo. But we'll take it track by track. Now, one thing I'd like to mention is that I'd love to be able to make the comparisons between the original vinyl and the 2009 remaster and this new release and put them in a side-by-side comparison, but I can't because, well, it's YouTube. But I can tell you what I know, having 50 years of experience with this album. Let's start with the title track, leading into With a Little Help from My Friends. The crowd noise at the beginning, yeah, it's full, it's lush, it lets you know that, yeah, it's Sgt. Pepper, but somehow it just gets dispersed through the mix, and there's little missteps along it that, well, Giles, maybe you should have paid a little bit more attention to your dad's notes. But going into With a Little Help from My Friends, very nice segue, just the way it should be. Very nice mix, and Ringo's vocals sound really good, so hats off to you for that one. Then there's Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Now this is the first in the series of mistakes that Giles Martin and Sam O'Kell made. In the original version, in the middle 8, John Lennon's vocals are supposed to mix exactly with George Harrison's guitar, so they sound almost as one. Not so the case in this mix. You can tell the two of them apart, they're clearly separated, and you can clearly tell that it's not the way it's supposed to sound. Bad misstep. Plus, there's a couple of little mismixes that are in there, if you will. Mismixes is even a word. But there's a couple of missteps, but overall, a good mix. Not a great mix, but a good mix. Then there's Fixing a Hole. This is where it starts to get good. I really like the mix on this one. Very lush, very full. Paul's vocals are right there in your face, and George's guitar just hits the mark. Well done on this one. Next, of course, comes She's Leaving Home. Very lush mix. Obviously the guys were doing their homework on this one. Very lush strings, very full. Love the equalization on this one. Very interesting mix overall. But I'm a little bit disappointed with the background vocals. Again, shouldn't have separated them too much. It does actually sound like two separate entities when it's supposed to sound like one. That's the way the Beatles always sang backgrounds. A little disappointed with that, but overall, again, a very good mix. Next was a big disappointment for me, being for the benefit of Mr. Kite. The story goes that John Lennon told the late Sir George Martin he wanted to, quote, smell the sawdust, end quote, when it came to the overall mix of the song. That's why they came up with what George Martin later called the whirly bits, the calliopes and all of the whirly little sounds that we hear at the end of the song. Unfortunately, though, this is so overbearing that it actually takes away from the general mix of the song. In some cases, the piano is missing, and in some cases, John's vocals just sound weak. They're not the way that they should be, and they're not in the place they should be. They're not up front as they should be. Sorry, Giles, you missed the mark on this one. Next, of course, comes Within You and Without You, and this, for me, was the best mix on the album. So good, in fact, that Giles Martin and Sam O'Kell actually corrected a couple of mistakes that his father made on the 2009 remaster. On the 2009 remaster, the sitars were a little in the background, a little too much, and it's almost until the second solo that he realized what had happened and beefed them up. What Giles Martin and Sam O'Kell did was bring those sitars and the guitars right to the front, right where they should be, and mix them beautifully with the rest of the Indian instruments, and George's vocals are just as angelic as the day he recorded them. A very good mix. Thumbs up, guys, you got that one just perfect. When I'm 64, where's the piano, Giles? Where's the piano in the background, and why do you have the background vocals overbearing the lead vocals? It's just too much. Again, you gotta read your father's notes on that one. The reeds sound great, but overall, another miss. Lovely Rita. Again, the vocals are just not in your face enough. They're laid back for some reason. Don't understand why. The background vocals are overbearing the lead vocals. And what's that third voice going into the final verse? Guys, are you sure they wanted that on that album? I've got good news and I've got bad news for Good Morning, Good Morning. The good news is that the drums sound terrific. Ringo never sounded in better form. Love the way you guys mix that. The bad news is McCartney's bass sounds muddier than anything. It sounds like he's playing in a fruit cellar. What were you guys thinking? Now the horns, different story. Nice and beefy, right up front, right where they should be. And the vocals, right there, right where they should be, along with the harmony. Should have played with the rhythm section a little bit more though. Oh, and by the way, at the end of Good Morning, Good Morning, one of the things I was really concerned about was one of the tricks that George Martin used that really was a feather in his cap and added to his legacy. One of the things about that song that I was really worried about was something that George Martin was very proud of and was quite a feather in his cap. It was a nice little technique that he used where he took one of the chicken clucks coming out of Good Morning, Good Morning and turning it into a guitar note that went into the reprise of Sgt. Pepper. Thankfully, nobody touched that. Thank you. It sounds really good. Again, the reprise of Sgt. Pepper, overall the mix isn't bad, but there's a couple of elements in there that for these 50-year-old ears, I've never heard them before. Guys, are you sure you got the mix right on that? Did you read all the notes? Finally, there's A Day in the Life. Did they get this right? Well, the nice part is that John's vocals sound terrific. The piano is right where it should be. The drums fill everything out perfectly. The problem is in the crescendos. There were 4 sessions of the orchestra that were recorded and overlaid on top of each other to create that crashing sound that went into the middle 8 and then went into the end. Unfortunately, with this new mix, you can hear the separate sessions for yourself. You can hear what each session is doing. You can hear how they're trying to catch up to each other. This may or may not be a good thing for the listener. For these ears personally, I found it disjointed. I found it taking away from the overall original mix. Didn't like it. Should have mixed those a little bit tighter. Then, of course, the big question. What about the note? You know the one I'm talking about. That final, crashing, angelic, orgasmic E major note on the piano that signals the end of the album. Yes, they got it right. It is full, it is lush, it is in your face, and it goes on forever just the way it should. Well done, gentlemen. And yes, the dog whistle and the inner groove are in there as well. So That's always a lot of fun too. Also in this box set, there is the original 1967 mono mix of the album. Thankfully, this is completely untouched. Perhaps this was an homage to John and George and the Beatles as a whole, because as I said before, they always mix their albums for mono. There's a couple of little nuances in that mix. You might want to check that out for yourself. It's a lot of fun, and it's a great way to compare this new mix. Also, I'd like to take a moment out to thank the Beatles and Apple Records for not including Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane in the running order of the album. The story goes that George Martin had always said that not including those two songs in the album was the biggest mistake of his life. And there had been rumors before the release of this album that they may be included in the running order. And yes, there are new mixes of this song along with the original mono takes. There's also all kinds of little extras, and I'm not even going to try to give away. There's lots of little extra takes that if you put it together, you find out the difficulty and the imagination that it took for this album to be made in 1967. Remember, this was only 4 tracks. This was analog recording. There was a lot of limitations, but somehow George Martin and the Beatles went right past that and put together a cohesive album that still stands the test of time. My favorite part of the entire album is actually not part of the album. ITV released a television show in 1992 celebrating the anniversary of Sgt. Pepper with the making of Sgt. Pepper. Great interviews with Paul and Ringo and even George Harrison, George Martin, lots of other folks that are in it, and it talks about how the album was made. If you get a chance, you need to watch this in order to maybe even understand a little bit of what I'm talking about, of how groundbreaking and how revolutionary this album was for its time, and how it still is the standard by which all albums are judged. Overall, on a 5-star rating, I would give the 2017 mix of Sgt. Pepper 3.5 out of 5 stars. Like I said, Giles, Sam, read Dad's notes, and remember, it's all in the listening. Well, that's going to do it from here, fellow YouTuber. I really do appreciate you watching this. If you like it, hey, you know what to do. We'll see you next time. And I know I'm mishandling it properly, so please, vinyl purists, please don't email me or comment.